right? And the people who are sitting pretty at the top of our society, they don't have the motivation to change things because it doesn't really affect them. And it suits them pretty well if people are fighting over the crumbs. But if you stop fighting over the crumbs and you come together as a movement, then things begin to change. And then you can put the pressure on them to do things differently. And in that sense, although I think we should get rid of the government, because I think the government are too committed to the interests of landlords and developers and all the rest of it, we don't need to wait to get rid of the government to do something about housing. And I think that's very important. We forced a mass movement, I mean, not we, but a mass movement of people forced a Fine Gael government to get rid of water charges. Did they want to get rid of water charges? No. But they're forced to get rid of them because the movement on the streets was unstoppable. And they had no choice but to capitulate. And any movement of people will start to have a pressure, and the bigger that movement is, the more pressure for change. And even that's true locally. George's Depot has already been mentioned. Okay, George's Depot was originally earmarked to be sold. We protested about the plans to sell it and said it should be used for social and affordable housing. That battle and that argument started in the council and started in this area about 8 or 9 years ago. It was designated to be sold. Now we're still talking about selling some of it, but because the issue was fought and argued over, there's now 12 council houses down there. There should be 50 council houses down there, but we got 12. And we can get the other 50 if we fight for them. We can get the 500 council houses, public and affordable houses, whatever, at Shangana if we fight for them. If we don't fight for them, they will privatise 2/3 of that site. That's what's going to happen. In Cherrywood, we can get some of that land for public housing, but we're not going to get it unless we fight for it. That, to me, is the lesson. And it's not about saying there's one tactic that is the supreme tactic. It's multiple tactics. The water charges movement had multiple tactics. There were people blocking meters, there were mass demonstrations on the streets, there were mass assemblies all over the country, there were groups and networks established everywhere, there were leafleting networks that were distributing hundreds of thousands of leaflets, there were posters, people did what they can. Some people will occupy, other people have got families or kids or a job 9 to 5, they can't occupy. Don't say they can't be part of the movement. Of course they can be part of the movement. Every bit of pressure helps. If your movement is open to everybody who has a stake in this. And as has been said, everybody pretty much has a stake in this. But even if you think about the people directly affected, there are the ingredients for a mass movement. As I mentioned, there are 400,000 people, more or less, on housing lists. There are 70 or 80,000 in mortgage distress. There are tens and tens and tens of thousands of young people who know now, who are in college and are coming out of college, who know they can afford nowhere to live. There are thousands and thousands of travelling people who are being denied proper accommodation. There are huge numbers of working people who are working their back off but can't get a loan off the bank because house prices are completely out of control and the banks won't lend them the money for that reason. Okay, so there are already vast resources of people who, if we can pull them together, we can build this mass movement. But it does, as a number of people stressed, require us to understand the question of unity and not allowing anything to divide us. And that's my answer to the question on migration, right? Or anything else. It's a distraction, right? And once you go down the road of saying there's some people less entitled to housing, then it's a downward spiral. Then it becomes my case, I have more of a right to housing than you do. I have more right than the single mother. I have more right than the person who's, got a job. Or because I'm in a hub, I have more right than somebody who's been on the housing list for 15 years. And people then are scrambling and killing each other, and that's a no-win situation. A few might get lucky, but unless we get thousands of council houses built, and unless we get tens of thousands of empty properties that are sitting there and being hoarded by speculators and landlords, we are not going to solve the problem for the majority of us. So there has to be unity, or we will not win this battle. And to demand the basic principle that housing is a human right and indeed to mobilise some of the arguments that Vincent mentioned, to build that sort of movement. And yes, occupations and civil disobedience should be part of that. We've spotted a few buildings around Dun Laoghaire that we're thinking of doing, right? But it's going to depend on what people here are up for doing. And we need all of the people here to be part of that conversation. So I really do want to encourage people to get involved. You don't have to be want to join people before profit. We are part of the National Housing and Homelessness Coalition, which has lots of opposition parties working together, lots of trade unions, lots of grassroots activist groups, and we want to work with anybody, regardless of their background or their political affiliation or no political affiliation, in building a big mass movement. So if you're up for that, we want to appeal to you to get involved in that. And that starts with October the 3rd. It's a work day, which may be difficult for some of you, but we're appealing to people if they can take a bit of time off to win a few hours, if you work in the city centre, or if you're not working and can make it, to get in, because there's going to be an emergency motion in the Dáil that day, which will be backed by a number of the opposition parties, calling for an emergency programme of public and affordable housing, calling for rent controls that you were referring to, calling for an end to any eviction that leads somebody into homelessness, calling for the insertion of the right to housing into the Constitution, and calling for robust and aggressive measures to get hold of empty property where that property is sitting empty without justification. Okay, so there's a whole number of measures which the government could take, but we need everybody to come together. And beyond that, that's not going to be the end of it. There's going to be more demonstrations in November. We're also planning to have a big, open, popular housing assembly where people from all over the country can come together and discuss how we take the thing forward from that. But we just need to keep pushing, keep putting the pressure on, and mobilising all the different people who may have lost hope, and give them hope and activate them. And if we do that, we can win this battle. If we don't, it's going to get worse. And that is the choice that we have. So I hope people are up for that fight. And we'll do that at about a local level. And we have got thoughts and plans. We want to hear your ideas, how we can sort of activate. Now I will say, this is the very last point about the local area. We have to fight on some of these key sites, like Shangana, like Cherrywood, like George's Depot, like the traveller accommodation site that the council are trying to sell from under the feet of the travelling community. We need people to fight at that local level, and then we need to link that into the big national fight to change policy. If you're up for that, we will be back to you. So leave your contact details. We hope we'll see everybody on October 3rd. Please take away bundles of leaflets with you to distribute to your neighbours, your friends, on your street, in your estate. Get on your social media and just hashtag October the 3rd, raise the roof, take back the city, and spread the word so that there's nobody who cares about this crisis doesn't know about that demonstration, and will strike a blow for housing rights in this country.
Thanks a million for that, to all the speakers. But before we kind of finish up, just to kind of put a bit of structure on that, are people here, do you all want to kind of stick together and campaign around the issue of housing? Yeah? Yes. Yeah. Those in favour? Yeah. Great. Do you want to get the photo for social media? A campaign set it up in Dun Laoghaire.
Put your hands back.
Hands up.
Oh jeez, I'm taking a selfie, hold on. It's not used to anyone. Everybody say aye.
Aye. Now there were lots of proposals of different things we can do, and you know, I mean, one kind of general proposal would we agree that we will put all of those into the mix of how we're going to campaign on this. Now, obviously the most immediate thing is October the 3rd, and taking leaflets and trying to bring people from here on that. But are people in favour of throwing all the direct actions, the local actions, the occupations, all of this into the mix as we try and campaign for housing? Yes. Yeah? All in favour? Yes? Great. There were specific proposals. I think this is really important, is the council land, you know, that they're trying to sell. And the plea from the woman from the Traveller Action Group for solidarity